It started as an ordinary flight, just another busy day in the skies. Passengers were settling into their seats, overhead bins clicking shut, and the hum of the engines filling the cabin. But then, tension cracked the calm like a thunderclap. Karen, a woman in her mid-40s, was visibly frustrated, tapping her foot, glaring across the aisle. The reason? A pregnant woman had taken the seat Karen wanted. What should have been a simple request turned into something no one expected. Karen's voice grew louder, her insistence sharper, until finally she did the unthinkable. She called 911. Yes. Right there on the plane, Karen demanded emergency intervention, claiming her rights were being violated over a seat swap. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to step in or stay silent. Phones were out, whispers grew, and the flight attendants tried to calm the storm. The pregnant woman, calm yet clearly uncomfortable, simply looked at Karen, unsure how this situation had escalated so far. What happens next will make you question how far someone will go over something so small. Karen's demand didn't stop at calling authorities. She insisted the airline conduct a full flight audit, and the crew, now tense and cautious, had no choice but to comply. People around them began to pull out earbuds and stare, capturing the scene on their phones. You could feel the pressure in the cabin tighten, like the plane itself was holding its breath. Passengers whispered theories. Why did Karen feel so entitled? Was the pregnant woman being unreasonable? Or was this just another classic case of someone taking things way too far? The flight attendants worked tirelessly, trying to keep everyone calm, but Karen wasn't backing down. Every second that passed made the situation more surreal. Some passengers started murmuring about missing connections, while others simply stared, caught between disbelief and concern. By the time the pilot made an announcement, the entire plane was on edge. No one could predict what would happen once the audit started. Karen's insistence had triggered a chain reaction, one that might have consequences far beyond a simple seat swap. And just when it seemed like the chaos couldn't escalate further, a flight attendant revealed something that stunned Karen and the entire cabin, leaving everyone in complete suspense. As the flight attendant spoke, a hush fell over the cabin. Karen's face flushed with impatience, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. The crew explained that a full audit of the seating arrangements wasn't just a formality, it meant checking every ticket, every booking, and every rule the airline had in place. Suddenly, what seemed like a simple argument over a seat revealed layers of regulations, policies, and authority that most passengers never thought about. Meanwhile, the pregnant woman quietly clutched her bag, glancing around nervously. She had been on dozens of flights before, but nothing like this. She didn't want conflict. She just wanted a smooth journey. Yet here she was, at the center of an escalating storm she hadn't asked for. Around her, whispers grew louder, some sympathetic, some judgmental, and a few curious stares fixed on Karen, who now muttered under her breath, clearly irritated that her bold move hadn't immediately won her the upper hand. Passengers began to murmur about past incidents with difficult travelers and viral videos of airline disputes, connecting what they were witnessing to something larger, something almost surreal. The tension in the cabin was electric. Phones continued to record, a few cameras zooming in on Karen's frustrated gestures. The flight attendants moved with careful precision, balancing authority and diplomacy, trying to prevent a full-blown confrontation mid-air. Karen wasn't just upset about a seat. There was a deeper need to assert control, to make sure everyone understood she wouldn't back down. And as the audit slowly began, each ticket checked, each name verified, the situation started to feel less like a passenger dispute and more like a test of patience. Rules and human behavior under pressure. No one knew what the outcome would be. Would Karen get what she wanted? Or would the airline, the crew, and even the pregnant woman find a way to turn the tables? Every second stretched, leaving passengers on edge, hearts racing, and the plane suspended in a tense silence. One small misstep away from chaos, the flight attendants began the painstaking process of verifying every ticket, carefully checking names against the seating chart. Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some craning their necks to watch the drama unfold. Karen hovered nearby, arms crossed, muttering complaints under her breath like a storm cloud ready to break. The pregnant woman kept her hands folded on her lap, trying to stay calm. But her eyes betrayed a mixture of fear and frustration. This was supposed to be a simple flight, yet it had turned into a tense standoff that nobody could ignore. Around them, the cabin buzzed with speculation. Some passengers whispered that Karen had a history of causing scenes, while others sympathized with her insistence, thinking maybe rules weren't being enforced properly. Everyone seemed to have a theory, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. Meanwhile, the crew worked tirelessly, balancing politeness with authority, aware that a single misstep could escalate the situation further. The audit wasn't just about a seat, had become a symbol of control, fairness, and boundaries in an environment where tempers were flaring. Karen's impatience grew with every tick of the clock. She began pacing slightly, tapping her foot, and glancing at the pregnant woman as if expecting an apology that would never come. The pregnant woman, meanwhile, quietly stared out the window, trying to block out the tension, focusing instead on calming herself. She had experienced challenges before, but nothing like this a stranger making her feel unsafe and scrutinized for simply sitting in the seat assigned to her. As the audit dragged on, small details began to emerge: conflicting ticket information, unclear seat assignments, and even questions about airline policy that the crew had to verify. Every revelation added another layer to the mystery, keeping passengers on edge. Nobody knew what would happen next. Would Karen finally get her way, or would the situation spiral into something completely unexpected? The answer seemed just out of reach, hanging in the cabin like an invisible storm cloud. The cabin felt tighter with every passing minute, as if the air itself had grown heavy with anticipation. Karen's voice, once controlled, began to rise again, her frustration seeping into every word. She questioned the crew, demanded explanations, and even argued with fellow passengers who tried to reason with her. The pregnant woman remained calm on the surface, but her hands clenched tightly in her lap, knuckles white. She had no idea how far Karen might go, and the uncertainty gnawed at everyone nearby. The flight attendants moved methodically, checking ticket after ticket, calling names over their intercom system, and jotting notes on clipboards. Each verification seemed to raise more questions than answers. Passengers whispered to one another, pointing out inconsistencies in seating charts or previous boarding announcements. Phones were out, recording every tense glance, every muttered complaint, and every sharp word exchanged. It felt less like a flight and more like a courtroom drama. With everyone waiting for the next bombshell, Karen's impatience reached a boiling point. She leaned over the row in front of her, her voice cutting across the cabin, demanding to know why the audit wasn't finished yet. The crew remained calm but firm, explaining that accuracy was essential, and rushing could create bigger problems. Around them, other passengers began to shift nervously, some sighing in frustration, others wide-eyed at the unfolding chaos. The pregnant woman looked down, trying to disappear into her seat, wishing she could simply escape the tension that had enveloped the entire plane. Then, just as the audit seemed to be nearing a critical point, the lead flight attendant paused and called for Karen and the pregnant woman to come forward. The cabin went silent. Everyone's eyes were glued to the aisle, whispers fading into a tense hush. Even the engine seemed quieter, as though the plane itself was holding its breath. Something about the way the attendant spoke, calm but firm, made it clear that whatever was coming next would change everything. Passengers leaned forward, hearts racing, and Karen froze. suddenly unsure if she was ready for what was about to happen. The moment stretched unbearably. And then, the flight attendant dropped a piece of information that made Karen's face pale and left the entire plane stunned. The secret revealed wasn't what anyone expected, and it promised to turn the entire situation upside down. The cabin remained tense, every passenger frozen in their seat, eyes wide and ears straining. Karen's face had gone pale, but before she could speak, the lead flight attendant leaned closer and revealed something even more unexpected. It wasn't just a seating mix-up or a ticketing error. According to the airline's records, the pregnant woman's assigned seat had been flagged for a specific safety concern, and moving her, as Karen had demanded, could have violated strict safety protocols. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Phones buzzed with whispered comments, recording every word, every reaction. Karen's frustration turned into shock, and then into disbelief. She opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. She hadn't realized that her insistence on switching seats might have put someone at risk. Meanwhile, the pregnant woman blinked in confusion, trying to make sense of the sudden attention. She hadn't asked for this drama, yet now it seemed like the spotlight had shifted directly onto her, and not in a way she wanted. Passengers whispered furiously among themselves, connecting the dots and speculating about the safety warning. Some expressed sympathy for the pregnant woman, others grew impatient with Karen, and a few looked around nervously, realizing just how close the situation had come to danger. The atmosphere in the cabin felt charged, like static electricity before a storm. But just when everyone thought that tension had reached its peak, the flight attendant paused again. She revealed another twist. The audit had uncovered yet another irregularity, this one involving Karen's own booking. Something in her records didn't match the airline's policies, and it could trigger consequences far more serious than a simple seat dispute. Karen's confident demeanor faltered as murmurs grew louder. Passengers leaned forward, heartbeats quickening. Caught between curiosity and disbelief, the plane felt smaller now, the hum of engines almost drowned out by the collective suspense. Every eye was on Karen, every whisper building a storm of anticipation. No one knew what would happen next, and the tension had reached a breaking point. It was clear that this flight would be remembered long after the wheels touched the ground, and no one could predict whose actions would tip the scales first. The tension in the cabin was unbearable. Karen's face had drained of color, her usual confidence replaced with uncertainty as the flight attendants carefully laid out the results of the audit. Every passenger leaned forward, some gripping their armrests, others holding phones ready to record the outcome. The lead attendant spoke slowly, deliberately, as if every word carried the weight of the situation. "It appears," she began, "that both your concerns have been addressed, but in ways that none of us could have anticipated. The pregnant woman's assigned seat was indeed flagged for a safety measure, and had she been moved, it could have caused a serious issue mid-flight." Karen's insistence had inadvertently highlighted a protocol that the crew would now review in detail. The cabin murmured, realizing just how close the situation had come to something far more serious than a simple argument. But the surprises didn't stop there. The audit also revealed that Karen's ticket had a minor discrepancy and overbooking error that meant she wasn't actually supposed to be in that row at all. The airline had inadvertently allowed her to board in a seat she technically wasn't assigned, which explained why she had been so adamant about switching. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her sense of entitlement had collided head-on with reality, leaving her stunned in front of everyone. For a moment, the plane seemed to exhale collectively, the tension slightly easing as passengers realized that the situation was under control. The pregnant woman relaxed, smiling faintly at the calm professionalism of the crew. Karen slumped back in her seat, her anger dissolved into embarrassment. Then, just as everyone began to think the ordeal was over, The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've had an unusual audit today, but for safety. We'll be making an unscheduled landing at the next airport to finalize a security check connected to one of the tickets. Please remain seated." A collective groan and wide-eyed stares swept through the cabin. Even the pregnant woman blinked in surprise. Karen's jaw dropped again. The story wasn't over. The consequences of the seat dispute had only just begun, leaving everyone on the plane wondering what would happen next. The plane touched down smoothly at the unscheduled airport, and the passengers felt a mix of relief and lingering tension. Airline staff boarded to handle the security check, carefully verifying the details of both Karen's and the pregnant woman's tickets. Passengers settled back into their seats, talking quietly, some still shaking their heads at how a simple seat disagreement had turned into such a dramatic ordeal. Karen sat quietly, avoiding eye contact, clearly reflecting on the chain of events. She had learned, in a very public way, that persistence and entitlement don't always get you what you want. The pregnant woman, meanwhile, remained calm and composed, grateful that the situation hadn't escalated further and quietly appreciative of the professionalism of the flight crew. Other passengers exchanged smiles and whispered reliefs, even joking lightly about the incident. To break the tension, but everyone had been reminded just how unpredictable life in the skies can be. As the audit concluded and the plane prepared to resume its journey, the flight attendants reassured the passengers that all safety protocols had been followed and that the remainder of the flight would be smooth. Karen finally acknowledged the pregnant woman with a quiet nod, a small gesture of recognition that perhaps a lesson had been learned. The cabin's energy shifted from tension to calm curiosity, and the crew moved down the aisle, offering reassurance and smiles. By the time the plane climbed back to cruising altitude, the story had left an impression on everyone aboard. It wasn't just about a seat dispute, it was about patience, perspective, and the importance of respecting rules and one another. Passengers would remember the flight for the chaos, the drama, and the lessons learned, but also for the way people stayed composed under pressure. In the end, what started as a heated confrontation had become a story of human behavior, unexpected twists, and the reminder that sometimes the smallest actions can have the biggest consequences. Don't stop here. The next story might just blow your mind. Subscribe, hit like, and share this with anyone who craves heart-pounding suspense and unforgettable twists.